Unions are declaring war on the finance minister. They're threatening mass action if public servants don't get pay increases in April. Treasury says the public sector wage review could save around 160 billion rand. Meanwhile, the finance minister, Tito Mboweni, also wants to clamp down on controversial churches suspected of tax evasion. Mboweni held another meeting with the Finance and Appropriations Parliamentary Committees today. Our reporters Govan Whittles, Lindsay Dentlinger and John Bailey all join us to discuss this further. So, Govan, let's start with you. And of course, the trade unions are not happy with the proposed wage cuts.
Yeah, they aren't happy at all, Shahan, and they're unhappy because they say that the finance minister yesterday went beyond the scope of his office and announced a review of the implementation of the third-year agreement to increase the wages of public servants. It all sounds a bit complex, but essentially Tito Mboweni said that the third-year increase of the wages for public servants won't be paid at the beginning of April. This is despite the deal already having been negotiated with the unions, and the unions saying that they have a legal document which will compel the ministers of public service and administration to pay that increase. And that's what they're willing to go to war over, and that's what Tito Mboweni estimates will save the national fiscus 160 billion rand. But it's a standoff at this stage, Shahan. Let's take a look now at what Bekin Chalinchali, the General Secretary of COSATU, had to say about it.
On the attack on the public services, COSATU rejects government's narrow fixation with the public service wage bill. We review this provocative budget as a challenge from the National Treasury, and we accept that. Will not allow the workers to be used as a scapegoat for this economic crisis. These cuts directed at the public service will have a severe implication for the economy. Poor regions rely disproportionately on the public service employment, and cutting wages of public servants will intensify poverty and regional inequalities in South Africa.
All right, let's go to Cape Town now. Lindsay, the finance minister back in Parliament today, what's he saying about the public sector wage bill?
Shahan, he initially didn't want to say too much. He told the committees that the less said about this matter, the better, and the reason for that is, he said he didn't want his utterances to have any unintended consequences. But he wanted to assure the House that there were consultations, there are discussions going on. He said maybe this had not been communicated so well, but it was certainly not a surprise, or it shouldn't come as a surprise, that this is what government has been mulling. The concerns really from the opposition parties is that right now this is only a proposal, and what would it really mean for the debt if it isn't able to negotiate something suitable that will see government cut the wage bill by 160 billion over the next 3 years, or at least 30-odd billion rand in this financial year. But this is what he told a joint meeting of these finance committees earlier this afternoon.
Now, the minister has formally, according to process, submitted proposals to the Public Service Coordinating Bargaining Council. Having taken account of all the conversations that have been taking place. So this is not a surprise to anybody who is involved in the process. But naturally, people are going to say things publicly. But I've been involved in negotiations with the trade union movement. I know how these things start and how they end. Sometimes they end joyfully. Other times they might not end joyfully. But that's life.
All right, let's move to Pretoria now. John Bailey, of course, the minister making mention of churches and tax evasion yesterday. How are they responding to that?
Well, Shahan, in South Africa, most religious organizations are classified as public benefit organizations. That means that largely they're exempted from paying tax. But what we've seen over the last few years is that you have these very flashy pastors, the lifestyles that they've been living, and in fact what SARS and the government is saying is that many of these organizations, these religious organizations, have deliberately been flouting the laws, and they found loopholes how not to pay tax. So what SARS is saying now is that they are actually raising their assessments on churches because they have to pay their employees, they have to pay them pay as you earn, and they also have to pay VAT, whether they have like a tuck shop at these churches or these religious organizations at their premises. So these has to be paid, and moving forward, these churches can definitely expect a visit from SARS, and to understand how they get to these pastors living in these massive houses and the type of cars that they are driving, and also some of them even owning planes. But let's listen to Etienne Retief, a tax expert, on what this is all about.
Here is understand, where did those assets come from? Is there an abuse? Is the right taxes being paid? And if there are concessions being used, that they are being used correctly and not being abused.
All right, Govind, let's bring it back to you. We know that COSATU is furious about the public sector wage bill being cut. What are they saying about SOEs, those very embattled ones, now getting most of the money?
Well, they're saying the SOEs are the ones that are draining the fiscus and not necessarily the public servants. But just to respond to Tito Mboweni, he's saying that he believes there was adequate consultation. COSATU says that that's exactly the reason why they consider it a declaration of war, because the finance minister's representatives from the Treasury only made this proposal to review the public sector wage increase for the third year the day before Tito Mboweni announced it in the budget, and saying that they've been ambushed and because of this they won't let it go. But the overarching point that COSATU is making, Shahan, is that South Africa doesn't know how much it costs to run the government. That's because the workers employed by state-owned enterprises all negotiate for their salaries individually or through their respective unions. There is no collective bargaining forum for the SOE's workers, and that's exactly what COSATU wants. That, as well as a number of other reforms, which would include SOEs such as Eskom and SAA. But let's have a look again at what Bekin Chalinchali had to say.
On COSATU Eskom proposal, the CEC received a progress report on the work done to engage with the social partners on the Federation proposal for an intervention package to save Eskom. This intervention will be based upon a social compact of government, business, labor and community. The proposal will see each social partner contributing for a broader public good. This is the first step on ensuring that workers dictate how and where their pension funds are invested. This proposal is also in line with our resolution adopted in the 8th National Congress that called for a federation to ensure that an appropriate mandate is set for investment managers and that workers' funds are used to promote the broader goals of development and decent work rather than a narrow interest of fund managers. The meeting resolved to expedite this work and also convene an economic workshop with progressive thinkers to take this work forward.
Lindsay, back to you in Cape Town. The Minister, of course, saying that charity begins at home. So what's the executive doing to show some goodwill?
Shahan, firstly, just to pick up on a point of what Govind just said now about what executives and others are earning in SOEs. We know the Minister also made that announcement in the budget yesterday that this year will be the year when there will be some form of regulatory framework set up that will benchmark those salaries, bring them more in line with the public sector, so that those wages don't spiral out of control. But yes, as you're saying, the charity starts at home. The Minister telling Parliament today that he understands that they are an independent arm of the state, but he would like to see them follow suit. We know that the executive are not going to receive salary increases this year, and the Minister also making some announcements yesterday with regard to other perks that ministers receive regarding their cell phones, their cars, etc. And he said it was all about, quote, political optics. We know the Minister has been snapped often on a plane in economy class, and he told Parliament today that even though it's extremely uncomfortable, you still get to where you need to go. And so he's hoping that the legislature will also look at ways to cut waste and cut costs. Let's take a listen again to what he told the House earlier today.
Some of the things are basically political optics. And as leaders in the House and the Council, I would like to encourage you to also join the executive in implementing certain cost containment measures. But the House is independent and therefore makes its own decisions. But it just looks very bad when it seems that the House does not join the executive in basic management of the cost structure.
John, let's go back to you now. And of course, when it comes to religious organizations getting donations, do they now have to declare that?
Well, absolutely, Shahan. Just because you are getting a donation doesn't mean that you don't have to declare this to SARS. In fact, there are strict regulations and laws that need to be followed when these religious organizations, when they receive donations, just like any other most other institutions and organizations. So this focus on churches is not so much that they are being targeted, but of course it's part of SARS' renewed effort to increase their revenue collection. But they are saying that if a pastor lives in one of these big houses, or they drive a flashy car, or they even have some of these planes that we've seen, then where does that money come from? And what the finance minister has been saying is that many of these religious organizations are saying that they are registered. He's asking, where are they registered? Show us the paperwork. So that's why they're going to increase, SARS especially is going to increase their assessment of these religious organizations to really get to the bottom of trying to understand where do they get their funds from.
All right, we're going to leave it right there. Every angle to the budget reaction. John Bailey's in Pretoria, Lindsay Dentlinger is in Cape Town, and Govan Whittles in our newsroom in Johannesburg.